What's up, guys? Tim Little. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today's video, we are talking about the Neko Rig, why you need to have one tied on right now. Before we dive too deep into the Neko rigging technique and those tips, I want to let you guys know that we are doing the buyer's guide, holiday buyer's guide for you again this year. You guys, that's one of our most recommended or suggested videos series, so we're going to be doing that this year. However, it is a little bit different this year. In years past, it's all the way leading up to Black Friday for that big Tackle Warehouse Black Friday sale. They've kind of changed things up this year, and they're basically doing a fall sale, different categories all the way through the holidays. So we're gonna have a little bit different lineup this year, but we will get through all of those buyer's guides here starting shortly for you. It's one of our favorite things to do for you, and like I said, one of our most recommended video series of the year. So we're really excited, looking forward to shooting that for you. So let's talk about the Neko Rig. The Neko Rig, the Neko Rig, whatever you want to call it, however you want to pronounce it. It is probably my number one bottom contact finesse bait this time of the year, right? Now, I did this video probably about a year ago, and I showed you guys some cool tips how to rig it
the base of the swivel
with putting a blade
and now you
on the
have
worm, adding some flash to it. Talked about rigging your favorite fluke style bait. So I have some baits for you. Gonna go over some rigging tips for you. But first and foremost, what is the Neko Rig? It is basically an off-centered wacky rig. Now, the reason that it plays such a role in my finesse fishing this time of the year is because it's all about bait fish. You guys have heard us preach about that the last couple months, right? Find the bait fish, find the bass. You know, even in our last few videos, we're power fishing. We're throwing lipless crankbaits. We're throwing square bills, glide baits, A-rigs, swim baits. But sometimes those fish pull down to bottom, they slow down, but they're still targeting bait fish. And in my opinion, a little Neko Rig with some good tail action down there shaking on bottom mimics a stupid bait fish, a dying bait fish, and you can really finesse fish those fish that are down there that aren't up in the water column and chasing. Okay, the reason that I don't throw just a typical weightless wacky rig setup, you know, the Neko Rig has a nail weight. If you're not running a nail weight in there, then it's just basically a wacky rig, an off-center wacky rig. But the nail weight lets that bait get down to bottom quicker. More importantly, it keeps the head of the bait contact with bottom, right, as you're dragging it, and that tail is up there doing that, right? So it looks like a little bait fish, goby, sculpin, whatever you want to call it, rooting around down there. So you can really catch those fish when they shut down and they're not eating a crankbait, or when they're not eating an underspin or up on top blown up, and catch them on top water. So the Neko Rig, even though you look at my deck right now, I got an underspin, a lipless, a blade bait, a frog, an A-rig, I almost always have this set up as my backup plan. So if you're a guy that likes to fish right now all the way through winter, you really need to add some sort of Neko Rig to your arsenal. So I'm going to give you some of my favorite baits. I'm going to show you guys kind of how to rig it for those of you guys that aren't familiar with the Neko Rig, or didn't get a chance to watch this video a year ago. You know, we've got, I don't know, 50,000 or 70,000 new subscribers, so maybe you guys didn't see that video last year. But a Neko Rig is hands down my favorite finesse bait this time of the year. And the number one reason being, I can fish it fast, right? It's all about moving. It's all about finding those active fish. And then once you find those active fish and they turn off and now they're not active, now you can slow down and target them with this, but you can still fish it fairly fast. You can still cover a lot of water. You know, you can make several casts with a Neko rig and get it back to the boat before you can make, you know, just a couple with a weightless wacky rig, right? So you can just fish it better. You have better fish it quicker. You have better bottom contact sensitivity. I got a little tip for you guys there. We'll talk about here in just a bit when we're talking about rigging. But it's a finesse bait, finesse presentation that you don't necessarily have to really slow down. You can fish it faster than a lot of other finesse techniques. So that's why I have it rigged up all the time, especially this time of the year. Now, with all the advancements in electronics, you know, a lot of guys are mid-strolling or hover strolling or Demiki rigging, whatever you want to call those types of techniques, right? Those fish are up in the water column and they're targeting those fish with, you know, some kind of swim bait or fluke style bait, but they're down in the, they're up in the water column and they're up there active. But when you see those fish, when you see those fish kind of leave that brush pile or leave that point up mid column and they drop down, there's not a lot of ways to catch them unless you're cranking or you're finesse fishing. So that's where this Neko rig really comes into play. And I'll be the first to tell you, I love power fishing. I'm grinding that crankbait, I'm speed cranking, I'm throwing that A-rig, I'm hopping that blade bait or that lipless. But we all know that there's the time we have those days on the water where they just won't commit to the reaction stuff and you got to downsize or you have to finesse fish. So let's talk about rigging real quick. And I got one special tip for you guys, especially if you're a guy that likes to fish offshore rock. This tip will help you out. But kind of talked about it briefly, the Neko rig. What is it? Basically, it's a off-center, and the reason I say off-center is because I want that head down towards the bottom, but it's a off-center weighted wacky rig. Now you can take your favorite soft plastics that you like to drop shot or wacky rig. Those will work, but I have some key baits that I have a ton of confidence in that have really produced a lot of fish for me, and some twists on that as well. So let's talk about rigging real quickly. I'm going to link all this stuff down below in the video description so you don't have to save it. The number one thing you're going to need is going to be, this is such a bait saver, such a money saver. This is the VMC crossover ring, okay? What this allows me to do, I take my favorite bait, and instead of rigging the hook through the plastic of the bait, I take the VMC crossover pliers. It's a wacky rig tool. You put your O-ring or your crossover, see that? Band on the plier part of the tool, and then you run your bait through, okay? Now, the key thing, the reason I keep saying off-centered, when we're wacky rigging, you want this band to be right in the middle of this bait. You want it to be symmetrical. You want that thing to have even fall as it slowly falls to bottom. Not with the Neko rig. So I actually take it about an inch and a half off of the head of the bait. And I put it right there. Again, the benefit of this using an O-ring or this VMC band, crossover band, when you hook a fish, this slides up and you're fighting the fish, your bait is up the line and you're fighting the fish down here on the hook, and you can catch multiple fish on a single bait. So if you're a guy that doesn't like to spend a lot of money on baits, or you like to get more than one fish out of a bite, get more than one fish on of a bait, you need to use some kind of O-ring or band. Again, those crossover bands have a little edge on them. See that right there? I don't know if you guys can see that. It's perforated, it has two holes in it, different directions. So then you can take your favorite wacky rig hook. As far as Neko rigging, I love the owner, the Sniper Finesse. It's got tungsten weed guard on there, light wire, and I rig that vertically. Now that is key. I haven't talked about that in videos in the past. You want to rig this so that your hook point is up, right? That makes this bait extremely weedless. Even without those titanium guards on there, this allows that bait to come through a lot of stuff that a normal wacky rig wouldn't come through, okay? So we got our hook, we got our bait, we got our band. The last thing, I really like using tungsten nail weights, but they are a little bit more expensive. The benefit to the tungsten, they're more dense. And here is why I use tungsten most of the time. When I insert this into the head, not the tail, but the head of the bait, rig that in as straight as possible. And this is actually by Swagger Tackle. It's a tungsten. It's the Pagoda weight. It has real aggressive ridges on it, and that helps that tungsten stay in that plastic when those fish come up and shake. Now here's the tip for you. You see that? A lot of guys will tell you to sink that all the way into the plastic. The reason being, it just sinks that nail weight deeper in that plastic, and when those fish come up and head shake, your chances of losing or flinging that tungsten sinker out decreases. So totally agree on that. However, if you're a guy that likes to have bottom contact and know your feel, say you're fishing offshore rock, you want to find where that rock meets that mud edge, clay, whatever it may be, give yourself a little lip, a little bit of that tungsten out of the head of your bait, because that's going to give you a lot more sensitivity, a lot more feel with what's going on. Yes, it's gonna having it in that plastic does deaden it quite a bit, but it's better than nothing, and you have a lot more feel when you have a little bit of that tungsten sticking out. Again, super important to rig your bait correctly, especially, I mean, on a Senko, I mean, that's my #1 bait. Basically because the color selection, the Senkos, Yamamoto Senko, there's so many good colors. This time of the year, for me, it's almost always a shad pattern, right? This is electric shad or natural shad. If I'm throwing a Neko Rig in the spring or in the summer, I might be throwing in like a June bug or a green pumpkin black flake. But right now, these fish are really feeding up and keying in on bait fish. So I'm going with those natural shaddy colors. So electric shad, but a Senko is my #1 bait because of the color selection. It is a little bit heavier bait, lots of salt in it. You can stretch it out and get some of that salt out if you want a little bit lighter, but fall slower. But that is the Neko Rig, okay? Hundreds of fish caught on that setup right there. Very, very, very popular, okay? Again, if you're particular like me, make sure that the back is towards the front. You want the hook going up. You got your belly of the bait towards the back. You can play around with that. I pay attention to those details. It's just my OCD, I guess. But that is a properly rigged Neko Rig, okay? Getting back to it, I can fish it fast. Now, if I'm target casting a brush pile or a break, a point on a break on a river swing or a dock piling or whatever, I can fire this thing out. It's gonna be a little bit heavier than your traditional weightless bait, right? So you can make longer casts, you can stay or position the boat farther away from those fish. You don't wanna get up there and crowd them. A lot of these fish right now are shallow. You know, as they drop the water, a lot of these lakes, they will drop the water for winter, and those fish are still shallow. So you don't want to get right up on them, right? So you want to stay back. So having that little extra weight in there allows you to cast further, and then also work that bait more aggressive with that head of the bait being weighted and having that tail up there just doing its thing, right? You can shake, 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 pause. Shake, 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 this is an aggressive style of fishing this time of the year for me. You know, it's going to slow down as we get into winter. We get into those colder nights, the colder water temps, those fish are more lethargic. Then we can go with a lighter nail weight and we can fish slower. But right now, cast, shake, 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 hop, hop, let it fall, drag, shake, shake, shake. You get past that piling, on to the next. You can still skip this really, really well. But again, don't sit there and just soak the worm, right? That's not this type of fishing. It's not this time of year. You might have to do that for the next couple months when we start getting colder. But for now, don't be afraid to be aggressive with your shakes, be aggressive with your hops, and move quite a bit quicker, okay? With that said, for the most part, this little box right here, I'm using 16 or 3/32. That's 3/32, a little bit heavier. That's my go-to. That's my go-to weight this time of the year. I want something a little bit heavier, something that I can move fairly quick. This little Spro box I showed you guys last year just has all of my different bands in here, depending on if I'm throwing a traditional straight tail worm versus like a fatter worm, or you know, something that I need to have different size bands. Got all my different wacky rigged hooks, and then of course I got all my weights and all that stuff down there. So these are cool little backpack boxes, boat boxes. You know, traditionally this has been my Neko Rig box, right? I got hooks, I got weights, I got O-rings, and I got baits. But if you're a guy that's lacking space, these boxes are awesome. But 3/32, that's typically the weight that I'm using because it's heavier, better contact feel, and I can fish it faster, right? Okay, so Senko, we talked about that. If you're a guy that loves Senko colors, but you want some action on the tail, go with their cut tail. Yamamoto makes an awesome cut tail worm that is really, really good for the Neko Rig, okay? Some other baits that I really like. Here it is right here. That's that Senko. This is my go-to setup. We'll talk about that in just a second. But some other baits that I really like. I don't know that I've talked much about it, Neko Rig. I've talked about it finesse fishing, but this is the Demiki Stinger. The benefit of this bait, it's got a tapered tail to it. Again, we are looking for aggressive tail kicks, lots of movement. These fish are active. When we transfer or we transition into the cold of winter, we're gonna go away from these style tails and we're gonna go more of like kind of dead action stuff. But right now, we want something that we can shake, shake, shake and have that tail up there dancing. So that Stinger is a really cool, it's like a tapered stick bait. You see that? It's a real fat head, allows for really to tuck that pagoda weight in there, allows for great Neko Rig fishing, okay? Show you guys that one. You can fish these things on braid to leader, straight fluoro. I mean, you can fish it however you want, but we'll go, after we talk about baits, we'll go into a little bit more depth on choice of rods, that sort of stuff. The other one for me, this one's been really good for me this year. Last year I talked about the quiver from Missile Baits. It comes in a couple different sizes. This is actually the 4.5. Okay, but the quiver has a paddle tail, right? So a lot, same kind of body shape as that Stinger, but instead of just having that kind of pointy tail, this has little beaver style of tail. So it's really important when you rig this bait that you put your O-ring or your band on to have that paddle facing forward and back, so you get a lot more action. But this is that little 4.5. This is an awesome little finesse presentation. I have that actually paired up on a BFS setup, and 3/32 ounce head, so I can get it down there. I can drag it along that rock pile. I can drag it along that dock piling, whatever it may be, but just a ton of action in that tail. You see all that action? That is a really, really cool bait. So that is one of my favorites as well. Couple other ones. You know, last year I talked about taking a Senko and putting a swivel with a centering pin and a blade on it, so you get some flash and some vibration. I'm not going to go into that, but I do want to branch out a little bit. Showed you guys how to Neko rig your favorite fluke style bait. Now with a lot of people downsizing, a lot of guys throwing little tiny baits on like your hover or your mid-strolling rigs, the little Demiki armor shad. This guy right here, this is a 3-inch bait. Okay, 3-inch bait. Same thing. This thing's down on bottom. Put a little, Rains makes, if you're looking for really, really small tungsten nail weights, look at Rains. I'll link those down below as well. But Rains has an awesome lineup of really small, down to like a 96th, I believe, nail weights. So you can take your favorite small drop shot hook with a little nail weight and take this little armor shad and make an awesome Neko rig presentation. Non-intrusive, but just having a little bait fish down there rigging, rooting around. You know, you could fish this on like a Ned head, but it wouldn't be nearly as weedless as having it on that that Neko hook. So that's another great alternative. What else? So we talked about some of my favorite baits. So we talked about the Senko, the cut tail. We talked about the quiver, the stinger. That's really my go-to baits. You know, in the summertime, more warmer weather, I'm going to use, you know, like my net bait, like my T-Max and my more traditional straight tail worms. But right now I'm downsizing a little bit and I'm going with more of my shad patterns, my bait fish patterns on bottom. Now, as far as gear, budget-wise, you can take your favorite 6'10" to 7'2" medium power rod, probably a fast action medium power rod, and you could fish all of those baits. If you're a guy that's trying to throw more of the downsize stuff, like that little armor shad, you're probably gonna want to take your favorite like drop shot rod, right? A little bit lighter tip, light action. But for the most part, that 6'10" to like 7'2" medium power rod will allow you to fish a lot of these baits. If you're a guy that's on the higher end of the price points and you're looking for a dedicated Senko, like a weightless Senko, wacky rig Senko, Neko rig rod, this is hands down my favorite setup. That is the NRX Plus. That is the 852. You guys have heard us talk about this rod in particular for many, many years, and that's paired up with the X-Sense. It's just a great, great lightweight, ultra sensitive worm rod. That is, in my opinion, the top of the line. A great budget option if you're a guy that's looking at that, like, I don't know, $100 to $200 price point range. A good, great rod in that lineup is going to be the Bass X. This is, again, that's that 7 foot to 7'2". This one's a 7'1" medium fast action. So you can throw the stinger on there. You can throw the little bit bigger baits. You can throw a little bit smaller, but that is a great combo. If you're a guy that's looking into, you know, both those combos I just gave you are rods that you can throw a lot of baits, a lot of different techniques on, but really universal, but high end. And then if you're a guy, like I said, that likes throwing that finesse stuff, and you like to stick with a bait caster, a BFS setup rigged, you know, 6, 7, 8 pound fluorocarbon, or real small braid, either 6, 8, or 10 pound braid with a fluorocarbon leader, you can get away with throwing your favorite Neko rig on a bait caster, and you can sit there and it's the same muscle memory shaking that worm as you would be throwing your 3/4 ounce, you know, jig. So really cool. A lot of different combos, a lot of different rods and reels that will work for this technique. I'll link some of my favorites down below in the video description. But a Neko rig, guys, for me, it's all about covering water. A-rigs, crankbaits, swim baits, underspins, and when I can see or I feel like these fish are just like post-frontal, you know, overcast, blowing out, post-frontal conditions. Now it's clear blue skies, windy, cold, those fish are just shutting down. I might have to slow down and pick up, you know, a finesse technique. But the Neko rig is a great alternative, kind of the real fast, aggressive fishing, if you will, in that finesse technique. So finesse category. But guys, if you have one finesse technique rigged up for you this time of the year, try the Neko rig. You know, granted, you might need a drop shot if you're vertical fishing, you might need a little finesse jig, but for the most part, if you could take these worms, downsize them, get them in your favorite shad colors, rig them like that, fish them aggressive, you guys will still catch a lot of fish. If you guys have any questions, please leave those down below in the comment section. I'll try to get those as soon as possible. But like I said, I will link these baits, some of my favorite colors, the bands, my favorite hooks, weights, all that good stuff down below in the video description to help you guys out so you guys are prepared and you guys can get out there and make yourself a box and have all the right size bands. I get this question a ton. You know, what is the right size band for a 5-inch Senko? That is a number 7, okay? But I'll link all this stuff down below in the video description and make it easy for you guys to find this stuff. But guys, those of you guys that are out here fishing, you know the fall is great fishing. Again, power fishing, power fishing, power fishing until it just doesn't work. And then you got to transition. And the Neko rig, especially right now, will put more fish in the boat and will put fish in the boat when some of those reaction baits won't. So guys, we appreciate you for watching. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you guys on the next video.